Hi, my name is Helen. I'm 32. I used to work as a sales representative for a large company, running around with catalogs, persuading clients, smiling even when I felt like howling. It wasn't an easy job, but the pay was decent. So decent that I decided to take out a mortgage, a small house with a red door and a flower bed under the window. It was mine. Maybe not a palace, but every corner of it breathed warmth and freedom. In that house, I felt for the first time that I could build something on my own, without handouts or favors from anyone. Of course, I have a family, my parents and an older sister, Karen, who's 35. Karen recently got divorced and was left alone with two boys, Jake and Tommy. They're 8 and 10. Good kids, loud, a bit spoiled. But that's not their fault. For as long as I can remember, Karen has always known how to be the center of attention. Even when her life was falling apart, she somehow managed to turn it into a drama. I often helped her out with money, just transferred it without asking what for. What else could I do? She's a single mother, living in a rented apartment, with a mediocre job and expenses popping up like mushrooms after the rain. But if I'm honest, this was nothing new. It had always been this way. Ever since we were children, Karen was on a pedestal, and I was somewhere below, in her shadow. My parents adored her as if she were a sacred cow. I was a good student, a quick learner, especially in math. But instead of being proud of me, they would sit me down next to Karen and say, "Help your sister, you're smarter." She didn't want to study, so I would slave over her homework until midnight. When Karen wanted to take piano lessons, I got excited too. But my parents said there was only enough money for one, and of course they chose her. I didn't argue, but inside, it was as if a door had closed, quietly, forever. When I brought home straight A's and Karen barely scraped by with C's, my mother would just shake her head and say, "Helen, you need to help your sister catch up." When Karen turned 16, our parents bought her a car. When my turn came 2 years later, they explained that I could share it with my sister. In practice, the keys were always in Karen's purse. When it was time for college, our parents paid for her tuition in full. They suggested I take out loans. Karen needs support more than you do. The list could go on forever. So when my phone rang on Tuesday morning and Karen flashed on the screen, I wasn't surprised. Most likely she needed money again. I knew that script by heart. But this time, her voice on the line was ringing, happy, as if she'd won the lottery. "Helen, guess what? I quit my job," she almost sang. I nearly dropped my coffee mug. "What? What do you mean you quit?" "I just told my boss that's it, I've had enough. No 2 weeks notice, no formalities. I'm free." I felt something tighten in my chest. "Karen, how are you going to pay the rent? How will you feed the kids?" She laughed, not a tired or nervous laugh, but a loud, carefree, almost childish one. "Oh, don't worry, you'll help me, just a bit, until I've had a rest and found something better." I stared at the phone as if it had gone mad. "What did you say?" "Helen, I'm tired. After the divorce, I've been working nonstop. I've earned a break. You make good money. You can support me for a couple of months. That's what family is for." Her voice was soft, but there was ice beneath that softness. "No, Karen, this is insane. You have 2 children. You can't just quit your job." There was a pause on the line, and then her tone turned sharp as needles. "Well, if you don't want to be reasonable, I'll call Mom and Dad. They'll talk some sense into you." And click. The call ended. I sat there clutching the phone in my hand. That familiar sticky feeling was rising inside me, a mix of shame, guilt, and despair. The same one I felt as a child when Karen threatened to tell our parents that I had stolen something or been rude. Back then, I would give in, do what she wanted, because otherwise I'd face my mother's cold, disapproving stare. About half an hour passed. My phone vibrated again. Mom was on the screen. I already knew where this was going, but I answered anyway. "Helen Thompson!" My mother's voice sounded as if she were shouting across an ocean. "What is wrong with you?" I didn't even have time to open my mouth. My heart was pounding dully in my chest. Here it was, a repeat of the old play where the roles were cast long ago. Karen, the poor victim, Mom, the judge, and me, the eternal defendant. "Hi, Mom," I said wearily, pressing the phone to my ear. "What are you talking about?" "Don't play dumb, Helen." Her voice rang with irritation. Karen called me in tears. She said you refuse to help when she's desperate. How can you be so selfish? I blinked, feeling a hot, angry surprise rising in my chest. Mom, Karen quit her job. No other job, no plan. She just decided that I should pay all her bills while she takes a break. This isn't help. It's madness. She's not taking a break, Mom cut in. She's recovering from a terrible divorce. You have no idea what she's been through. You have a good job, a house, stability. The least you can do is support your sister. Support? I gave a quiet laugh. Are you saying I should fully support a grown woman and her children until she decides she feels like working again? Yes, Mom said coldly. And actually, the decision has been made. Karen and the boys are moving in with you. You have that spare bedroom upstairs. It felt like a punch to the chest. What do you mean, moving in with me? Mom, no one even asked me. We're not asking, Helen, she said flatly. We're informing you. Karen needs a place, and you have it. This is my house, Mom. Mine. I bought it. I pay the mortgage. Family helps family. Her voice turned icy. Karen would do the same for you. I closed my eyes. No, she wouldn't. Karen has never done anything for anyone unless it benefited her. But arguing was pointless. I knew how this would end. You couldn't explain things to Mom. She'd already made up her mind. And, as usual, her decision was law. Suddenly, I heard another voice, low, tired, painfully familiar. Dad had taken the phone. Helen, he said, as if reading a verdict. You need to clean up the guest bedroom. The boys will need space for their things. Dad, I don't want anyone living with me, I exhaled, feeling my voice break. Too bad, he said coldly. Karen is your sister, and Jake and Tommy are your nephews. Stop being so damn selfish. Click, dial tone, silence. I sat motionless. Then, as if on autopilot, I left the office and sank into the driver's seat of my car. My hands were shaking. My breath was ragged. I stared at my reflection in the mirror, a pale face, red-rimmed eyes, and tried not to cry. But inside, everything was churning. This was how it had always been. Karen did whatever she wanted, and I dealt with the consequences. She broke things. I fixed them. She screamed. I stayed silent. And now, when she suddenly decided to quit her job, my parents turned to me again. Handle it. Fix it. Save her. But then a thought flashed through my mind. Quiet. Almost timid. I remembered a conversation from 4 months ago. My boss, Tom, had offered me a transfer to the company's Denver branch. I'd refused. I had just finalized the mortgage and was delighting in my new house like a child with a new toy. But what if the position was still open? I stood up, wiped my face with my palms, and went back into the office. My heart was beating fast but steadily. I knocked on Tom's office door. Hi, I said as he looked up. Remember that transfer to Denver you offered me? Is that position still available? Tom raised his eyebrows in surprise. Changed your mind? Interesting. Yeah, it's still open. Why do you ask? Let's just say circumstances have changed. When could I start? He leaned back in his chair and smirked. Hell, Helen, I was hoping you'd come back to me about this. You can start on Monday if you want. Then yes, I nodded. I want the transfer. Great, he said, already reaching for the phone. I'll set everything up. When I left his office, my legs were trembling, but it was a different feeling, a lightness, as if I were breathing fully for the first time in ages. I took out my phone and called Mike, an old friend who worked in real estate. Mike, hi, I need a favor. Can you find tenants for my house? Reliable ones with money who'll pay on time. Sure, he sounded surprised. But why the rush? You just bought the place. Long story, I replied. The main thing is I need it done quickly, like this week. Got it, he said. I'll see what I can do. I spent the rest of the day making lists, drawing arrows and dates in a notepad, planning my escape. If my family thought they could run my life, move into my house and dictate what was right and wrong, let them try. This time, it would be different. This time, I was making the decisions. I acted fast, very fast. It was as if a fuse had been lit under me. There was no turning back. I knew perfectly well. My parents and Karen wouldn't just show up at my door with suitcases. They would do exactly that. They would arrive, as always, without warning, with the air of people who had a right to everything that belonged to me. So I had a week, 7 days to disappear. I took sick leave for the rest of the week. At the office, they said, "Get some rest. You haven't taken a break in a while." If only they knew how I planned to rest. Every day after that turned into a sprint, from the closet to the box, from the box to the list, from the list to the car. I kept only what I really needed: a couple of suitcases of clothes, documents, my laptop, a few personal trinkets without which a house stops feeling like a home. Everything else, furniture, dishes, books, went into storage or was left for the new tenants. Mike was a lifesaver. He understood everything without unnecessary questions or moralizing. He just got to work. By Thursday, he called and said he'd found a great couple, a young family with a little daughter. The husband worked as an engineer at a local company. The wife was an elementary school teacher. Their daughter, Mike said, was about 7, a quiet, shy girl who had already picked out her dream room with the pink walls. They were ready to move in immediately and pay the first and last month's rent up front. I met them that same evening, a normal family with warm, slightly tired eyes. When I handed them the keys, something twinged in my chest, as if I were giving away not just a house, but a piece of myself. Every corner of that space held memories of me: the smell of fresh coffee in the morning, the light falling on the sofa, the sound of rain against the window. But I knew it was the right thing to do. I had to move forward. On Friday morning, we signed the contract. From that day on, the rent would go directly into my account. It all looked legal, clear, like a mature decision. And yet, there was a strange feeling of unreality. Me, Helen, renting out my house. The one I had dreamed of, the one I worked weekends for. But this was my choice for the first time, mine alone. By evening, I was stuffing the last boxes into the trunk. Everything I was leaving behind now belonged to the past. The day before, I had arranged for some of my things to be shipped to Denver and found an apartment online, small but cozy, with monthly payments. On Saturday morning, I hit the road. The highway stretched ahead, a gray ribbon sliding across the plain. Autumn clouds moved slowly, as if contemplating whether to interfere with my escape. Every kilometer felt like a step toward freedom. By Monday, I was standing at the door of my new office. It was smaller and simpler than the old one, but it had a human feel to it. People smiled warmly, asked if the move had been difficult. The work was the same, but the atmosphere was different, as if the mountains around made it easier to breathe. Tom had given me a great recommendation, and my new boss, Mr. Grayson, welcomed me gladly. For the first time in a long time, I felt valued. Not because I owed anyone, but simply because I was good at my job. On Tuesday, I set up my apartment. I bought some furniture, a couple of plants, groceries, and got the internet connected. The space was still a bit empty, but in that emptiness, there was cleanliness, silence, and the possibility of starting over. For the first time in my adult life, I knew no one would knock on my door with reproaches, requests, or another catastrophe for me to fix. My family couldn't just show up and take over my world. But the calm didn't last long. On Wednesday afternoon, Mike called. "Helen," he said, his voice tense, "I've got 2 pieces of news for you. One good, the other, well, let's say dramatic." "Start with the good," I said, pressing the phone to my ear. "Your tenants moved in. They love the house, transferred the first month's payment up front. Everything's perfect. Serious, tidy people." I smiled, feeling some of the tension ease. "Great, and the dramatic one?" Mike let out a noisy breath. "Yesterday afternoon, a woman showed up at the house with 2 kids and, well, about half a U-Haul truck. Started banging on the door, demanding to be let in." I froze. I wanted to laugh, but the laugh got stuck in my throat. "Let me guess," I said quietly. "My sister." "I think so." Mike gave an awkward chuckle. The tenants were shocked. She was yelling that it was her sister's house, that she had keys and the right to live there. They tried to explain that the house was rented out now, but she wasn't listening. I closed my eyes, feeling irritation give way to an almost comic sense of relief. Of course, it was Karen. And of course, it had to happen this way. "How did it end?" I asked. Well, then an older couple showed up. Your parents, I guess. Mike's voice became cautious. They started arguing right there on the lawn, yelling at each other, at Karen, at the tenants. The neighbors came out to watch. It was a complete circus. I pictured it. Mom and Dad pale with indignation, Karen with her crying kids and loud voice, and the new family standing on the porch of my house, bewildered. Eventually, Mike continued, they left, but not before they took down my number from the "For Rent" sign. I couldn't help but laugh. It burst out unexpectedly, loud, almost relieved. Everything I had feared had already happened, and suddenly it became clear. I had nothing left to lose. Everything they could take, I had already left behind. They had driven all the way to my house, expecting to just move in, only to find strangers living there. Mike told me the whole story. The people in the car were unloading boxes and loudly knocking on the door, demanding to be let in because it's our daughter's house. I felt something inside me coil up, not from fear, but from a familiar, bitter fatigue. Their confidence that someone else's life had to bow to their whims was as old as our family. "Did they call you?" he asked, and I smiled wearily through the tension. Of course they had. An hour later, my phone rang again. Mom's name on the screen. Her voice wasn't asking, it was demanding. "Where are you? Where did you go?" I replied that I couldn't disclose my location, as it was now my personal life, not public domain. But she screamed into the phone, demanding to know because I was her daughter, and she had a right to know. That night, the barrage of calls began. First Mom, I saw her name, heard the familiar tone of reproach, and just sent the calls to voicemail, as if that could shield me from my old roles. Then Dad, then Karen. I ignored them all, turning off the sound and trying to sleep in the empty, dark room where every sound echoed with past anxieties. Messages came one after another. "Mom, Helen, call me right now. We came to your house. There are strangers living there. Where are you?" And in every word there was a demand, not a request. In the morning, I found 12 missed calls and 23 texts. I scrolled through them slowly, coffee in hand, feeling a strange mix of weariness, anger, and, unexpectedly, relief. The litany of their complaints was familiar. Mom called me a young lady and demanded explanations. Dad wrote that I had no right to run from my responsibilities. Karen asked for my advice and then accused me of betraying the whole family. In the end, I decided to answer only Mom, briefly, distantly. "I've moved. Stop looking for me." That message was a boundary, a line drawn in the sand of my life. A few hours passed. I thought maybe it had died down, but by evening came the reply I had expected, yet still felt its sting. "If you don't come home right now and let Karen live with you, we are disowning you. You are no longer our daughter." I stared at the screen for a long time. A part of me still reacted painfully to such threats. In childhood, it was the fear of losing my parents' love that made me give up my own desires. But now the feeling was different. A new understanding of my own worth was solidifying in my chest. If they were ready to disown me for not letting them run my life, then so be it. My reply was cold and free. Go ahead. The first few days were indeed relatively silent. No calls, no pestering messages. I started to think that maybe their anger had subsided, that the storm had passed. But the calm turned out to be the prelude to a new wave. Karen made a Facebook post. In it, she laid out her pain publicly, adorned with an expectation of support. She wrote that she had quit her job because she was drained from the divorce and needed a break, that she had no income and nowhere to live with her 2 small children, and that I, her own sister, had refused to help her. The tone of the post was one of naive surprise at this family betrayal. The comments flew in instantly. Karen's friends and acquaintances rushed to her defense. "Oh my God, that's awful. Family should always be there. How could anyone do that?" Even Mom liked the post, a tiny click that hit harder than any word. It was unpleasant, bitter, even humiliating, to see family disagreements spill into public view, where everyone could add their 2 cents without any responsibility for the consequences. But public opinion wasn't uniform. Other voices emerged, those who saw the situation differently. Our cousin Lisa commented, "Didn't you quit without finding another job? Don't the child support payments cover some expenses?" Uncle Mark wrote plainly that Karen had made the decision to quit herself and that it wasn't Helen's job to solve everything. And Aunt Sarah, subtly and restrainedly, added that she loved both of us, but didn't think Helen should have to support her sister indefinitely just because she decided to take a break. The comments under the post flared up like a bonfire, with everyone feeling it their duty to add fuel. Karen's friends droned on about injustice, accusing me of heartlessness. But the longer the storm of words raged, the clearer other voices became, calm, reasoned. More and more relatives pointed out that Karen had put herself in this situation. They reminded everyone that she received child support from her ex-husband, substantial and regular payments. Jake and Tommy weren't starving. They had a roof over their heads and a father who reliably fulfilled his obligations. Karen was just used to being taken care of, and deprived of that, she was lost, as if the world owed her sympathy. That evening I sat in my new apartment, looked at the Denver lights outside the window, and thought about everything that had happened. The spacious living room, which hadn't yet absorbed my scent, seemed like a symbol of something new, clean, devoid of the past. A mug of cold tea sat on my lap, and my thoughts wandered between memories and fatigue. And suddenly, an important one surfaced, something I had repressed long ago. 6 months ago, my parents had called asking for help. Their voices had sounded tired then, as if the world was collapsing under the weight of hardship. My father complained about mass layoffs at work. He'd been put on part-time hours. Mom was still working at the department store, but earning pennies. They were struggling to pay the mortgage and were barely keeping their heads above water. I didn't think twice back then. I just did what I'd always done. I saved them. I set up an automatic transfer, $800 every month to support my parents until things got better. Months passed, the money left my account, and I never questioned how long this would last. Helping seemed natural, almost instinctive, like breathing. But now, after all their accusations, after Mom's "we're demeaning you" and Karina's public whining, I suddenly realized I don't owe anyone anything, especially not those who turned love into a tool for manipulation. I opened the banking app, found that specific automatic transfer line, and hit cancel. One simple action, and it was like cutting a thin but strong rope that tied me to their home, to their endless demands. For myself, I took a screenshot of the cancellation confirmation and sent a short message to my parents. "Since I'm no longer your daughter, I don't see any reason to pay the mortgage for strangers." It only took 3 minutes before the phone rang. "Mom." I stared at the screen for a long time before answering. "Helen, what have you done?" Her voice trembled, shifting between a scream and sobs. "You can't do this. We need that money. Without it, we can't make the payment." "Sounds like your problem, Mom," I replied calmly, even though my heart was pounding as if I'd jumped from a great height. Muffled weeping came from the other end of the line. "Helen, please. Karen and the boys are living with us now. She has nowhere else to go. We can't afford to feed them and pay the mortgage without your help." I exhaled. Of course, Karen was there now, too. "Maybe Karen should get a job then," I said quietly but clearly. "She's still recovering from the divorce. She needs time. She needs an income," I cut her off. "She has 2 children to feed. And if you say Dad is only working part-time, maybe he should look for a side job like normal people do when they're in trouble." Only quiet crying from the other end. "How can you be so cruel?" she finally breathed out. "This is all your fault. If you had let Karen stay with you, none of this would have happened." "My fault?" I laughed, but it sounded like steel. "Karen quit her job without having a new one. That was her choice, and you supported her instead of telling her it was time to be an adult." "She's family," Mom almost shouted. "So am I," I replied calmly. "But that didn't stop you from insulting me when I refused to do what you wanted." "We didn't mean to hurt you." "Too late." I said it quietly but firmly. "Mom, you made your choice. I pressed end call and without hesitation turned off the phone. My hands were shaking, my breath was uneven, but somewhere beneath that tremor, there was a feeling I hadn't experienced. It seemed ever. Freedom. For the first time in my entire adult life, I didn't give in. I didn't yield. I didn't save them. I simply said no. And it turned out to be the most powerful decision I had ever made. The next 2 weeks passed in blessed silence. No calls, no letters, no messages. For the first time in a long time, there was no one in my life demanding explanations. I threw myself into work. New projects, new faces, the usual dynamics where no one knew my family or my past. After work, I walked around Denver, a city that was slowly unfolding before me like a book smelling of fresh printer's ink. Small coffee shops, noisy bars, parks where musicians gathered in the evenings. Here, no one knew me as a daughter or a sister. Here, I was simply myself. Financially, contrary to my fears, things were better than ever. My salary covered all my expenses, plus the steady rental income from the house provided a tangible extra. And for the first time, I realized I could stand on my own 2 feet, confidently, calmly, without the support of those who had spent years convincing me I'd be lost without them.